Welcome back to Whispers of History. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because today we're diving into one of history's most fascinating figures, Winston Churchill. Now I know what you're thinking. Churchill, the man who saved Britain during World War II, the leader behind those legendary speeches, like, "We shall fight on the beaches," the man who stood up against Hitler? What could possibly be dark about him? Well, buckle up, because while Churchill was undoubtedly a towering figure in world history, there's another side to this man, a side many people don't talk about. Today, we're uncovering the controversial decisions, questionable beliefs, and actions that have cast shadows over his legacy. By the end of this video, you might just see this iconic leader in a whole new light. Let's start with a quick refresher. Winston Churchill was born in 1874 into British aristocracy. He climbed the political ranks, eventually becoming prime minister twice, first in 1940 during World War II, and again from 1951 to 1955. His leadership during the war earned him global fame, and today he remains one of the most celebrated statesmen in history. But let me ask you something. Do you think heroes are perfect, or does their greatness sometimes come at a cost? Churchill himself once said, "History will be kind to me, for I intend to write it." And boy, did he ever try. But as we dig deeper, we'll uncover parts of his story that even he couldn't rewrite entirely. One of the darkest moments in Churchill's career, the Bengal famine of 1943. During World War II, millions of people in India, then under British colonial rule, died from starvation and disease. Historians estimate that anywhere between 2 to 4 million lives were lost. So, how does this connect to Churchill? At the time, resources were being diverted away from India to support the war effort. Food shipments meant for the starving population redirected elsewhere, exacerbating the crisis. And when questioned about the famine, Churchill reportedly made callous remarks, blaming Indians themselves for reproducing too quickly or suggesting they should have done more to prevent it. Some historians argue that his policies actively worsened the situation, prioritizing military needs over human lives. Think about it this way. Imagine you're hosting a dinner party, but instead of feeding all your guests equally, you decide to save food for only a select few, leaving the rest to starve. That's essentially what happened here, except on a massive scale, and Churchill played a key role in those decisions. Now, before we move on, let's address another uncomfortable truth. Churchill held views on race that would shock many today. In letters and speeches, he expressed disdain for certain ethnic groups, often framing them as inferior to Europeans. For example, he once described Native Americans as savages and referred to indigenous Australians as a dying species. Now, to be fair, these attitudes weren't unique to Churchill. They were widespread among European leaders of his era. But does that excuse them? Think of it this way. If someone told you today that racism is okay, because that's just how things were back then, wouldn't you find their reasoning flawed? History doesn't absolve individuals of responsibility. It asks us to judge them within their times, but also to hold them accountable when necessary. Another stain on Churchill's legacy? It traces back to his early days in politics. As First Lord of the Admiralty, he supported brutal measures to suppress dissent in British colonies. One infamous event, linked, at least indirectly, to his ideology, was the Amritsar Massacre of 1919. At Jallianwala Bagh, British troops opened fire on unarmed Indian protesters, killing hundreds and wounding thousands. Now, interestingly, Churchill publicly condemned the massacre, calling it monstrous and criticizing its perpetrators. But here's the paradox. Critics argue that his earlier advocacy for harsh colonial tactics helped create an atmosphere where such atrocities became possible. A complicated contradiction. A man who could denounce violence, yet support systems that enabled it. To truly understand Churchill's darker side, we need to look at his vision for the British Empire. Unlike some of his contemporaries, Churchill wasn't interested in decolonization after World War II. Instead, he believed deeply in maintaining Britain's imperial dominance, even as other nations began pushing for independence. This commitment to empire put him at odds with emerging global trends towards self-determination. In fact, Churchill opposed granting freedom to countries like India, fearing it would weaken Britain's standing in the world. While his stance reflected loyalty to his country, it also revealed a blind spot regarding the rights and aspirations of colonized peoples. Imagine owning a business where employees demand fair wages and better working conditions, but you refuse to listen because you believe your way is best. That's similar to how Churchill viewed the relationship between Britain and its colonies. His perspective was rooted in power dynamics rather than equality. So, where does all this leave us? Is Churchill still the hero we we remember, or should we rethink our admiration for him? The answer, I believe, lies somewhere in the middle. Like any historical figure, Churchill was complex, a mix of brilliance and flaws, triumphs and failures. His leadership during World War II cannot be denied, nor can his eloquence and determination. But neither can we ignore the harm caused by his policies and beliefs. To fully appreciate history, we must confront its contradictions head-on. Only then can we learn from the past and strive for a better future. As Churchill famously said, those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Let's make sure we're learning all of history, not just the parts that make us feel good. Thanks for watching this episode of Whispers of History. Don't forget to like, comment, and share your thoughts below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into history, give us a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more videos like this. See you next time.